my house right now and stay as far away as possible. I don't have a mother like you.
Chinedu, your mother carries dark energy. If you don't throw her out, this whole family will die.
Son, I didn't do anything wrong.
My dear friend, before we begin today's story, take a moment to let your heart be still. Because this is not just a story about a mother. Not just a story about cruel rumors or a community blinded by fear. This is a story about us, about the way we see each other, judge each other, and sometimes hurt the very people who love us the most. Come with me, listen closely, and let the story reveal its truth on its own. Now I want to know, where are you listening from? Lagos, Nairobi, Accra, New York, London, Johannesburg? Or a quiet little corner somewhere in the world? Drop your city plus country in the comments. Every location you share becomes a small light connecting our African Tales family across the world. If today's story touched your heart, if you believe every family deserves to be heard, and if you want to continue this journey through real-life stories, rich with African soul, full of tears, but also full of hope, then please subscribe, like, share, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new stories from African Tales by TTL. Every subscription is a message of encouragement that helps us continue bringing healing stories to the world. The rumor spread like wildfire across dry fields. No one knew who said it first, but by the time the Lagos sun lifted itself over the crooked tin roofs of Ikorodu, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with one single story. Chinedu's mother was thrown out in the middle of the night because she's a witch. At the market, where baskets of bright tomatoes and fresh greens spilled onto the roadside, the sellers' cries were drowned out by poisonous whispers. Mama Uzo carries dark energy. The fish seller wiped her hands on her apron, lowering her voice as though she were talking about a deadly plague. I heard she's got the eyes of a witch, another woman added sharply, eyes bulging like she was telling ghost stories to children. They say the daughter-in-law claimed she made the kids sick. Ever since she arrived, that house has been nothing but bad luck. That sentence sharp as a needle pierced the morning air. No one asked, who saw it? Who heard it? Who checked? No one needed proof. In the poorer parts of Lagos, sometimes a rumor has more power than any evidence. A woman selling peppers shook her head and sighed. I used to see her going to church. Who would have thought? A young man pushing a garbage cart snorted. Even witches go to church. Mama, they just pretend to be holy, and that was it. With one simple line, an entire lifetime was stamped shut. Meanwhile, Mama Uzo wandered into the city like a fading shadow. That morning, she had no home to sweep, no yard to tidy, no little kitchen to light a fire for the porridge she used to make for her son. Wrapped in an old headscarf and a thin coat that couldn't keep out the dawn breeze, she walked slowly, each step adding another year to her age. Yet to the people passing by, her small, bent frame suddenly became frightening. Two children playing on the curb hid behind their mother the moment they saw her. The woman gripped their hands tightly and stepped away. Don't look, that's the witch they were talking about this morning. The whisper was soft, but loud enough for her to hear. Mama Uzo halted for a moment. The word witch stuck to her ears like hot tar burning, heavy, impossible to peel off. She had heard that word in folktales, in warnings from pastors, in threats adults used to scare stubborn children. Be good, or a witch will take you. She never imagined one day the word would be attached to her own name. Mama Uzo, the witch. She bent lower, clutching her wooden stick as if letting go might cause her entire body to crumble. At the market, the smell of dried fish, spices, frying oil, and dust thickened the air. She stood a little distance away, hoping someone might spare her a bite to eat. A donut seller turned, almost smiling, thinking she had a customer. But when she recognized the hollow cheeks and familiar aging eyes, she froze like someone had squeezed her heart. We're out of donuts, Mama, she said quickly, though the tray in front of her was still full. Even crumbs would do, my child. I haven't eaten since last night. Her voice trembled, not just from hunger, but from the humiliation of calling someone young enough to be her daughter my child, asking with the humility of someone who had spent her whole life standing tall. The girl turned away. Not today, Mama. If people see, they'll talk. Please move along. She wasn't wicked. She was afraid. In a place like this, reputation is everything. One wrong rumor could destroy a livelihood. Mama Uzo nodded. She didn't get angry. She simply pulled her scarf higher to cover more of her face, hoping that if people saw less of her, they might fear her less. But the eyes still followed her. Tight lips. Shakes of disapproval. Sharp TSK sounds like tiny judgments falling on her shoulders. See, she won't even look people in the eye, which, yeah. There's something strange about her eyes. No one realized that the only strange thing in her eyes was exhaustion, deep, bone-tired exhaustion of someone who had walked too far away from the place she once called home. As the sun climbed, Lagos heat descended like blades. Corrugated roofs burned, asphalt steamed, vendors covered their heads with scarves, torn hats, anything. Mama Uzo kept walking. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go back. Every time she turned in her mind, she saw the door of her own home fly open, heard Nika's scream strike like lightning, "Get her out!" And her son's voice thin, trembling, paper fragile. "Mama, please go." She had thought that by walking away, everything would settle. Her son would be fine. The house would be fine. But what was the price of that peace? A mother wandering the city like a dry leaf blown by the wind, too worthless for anyone to pick up. By afternoon, dark clouds gathered above Lagos. Vendors hurried to pack up their goods. Awnings rattled, sacks tied, motorcycles roared to life. Mama Uzo stood at the roadside, trying to avoid the dirty puddles. A car sped by and splashed a wave of cold, brown water across her legs. She froze, staring at her now soaked, stained dress. The driver never looked back. From somewhere far off, the church loudspeaker crackled, blending with a nearby radio. Hymns, sermons about faith, kindness, love. She gave a bitter smile. Kindness? She used to believe that if she stayed gentle, patient, humble, life would leave her alone. That her son, no matter how far he went, would remember the hands that held him during fevers, during storms, during everything. But last night, the person who pushed her out was the very child she raised. Maybe between faith and fear, people prefer the thing they can see, even if it's just a lie whispered by someone angry. When the sky finally broke open, releasing cold rain, Mama Uzo was nearly drained of all strength. Her knees throbbed, her back was tight, her feet burned from walking endlessly on cracked pavement. She searched for any shelter, anywhere at all. A small convenience shop had closed early, its metal shutter pulled down, leaving only a narrow overhang. Rainwater streamed off the roof, leaving black streaks on the peeling wall. Mama Uzo sank beneath it, back against the wall, legs drawn in, arms wrapped around herself for warmth. People hurried past. Some glanced at her, then looked away even faster, as if keeping their gaze on her for too long would let dark energy latch onto them. The rain grew heavier, pounding the ground, drumming the rooftops, roaring over engines and voices. In all that noise, her whisper barely existed. That night, she slept curled beneath the shutter of a closed shop, fighting the cold cutting into her bones. She murmured, "Lord, I didn't do anything wrong." But no one heard her. The next morning, Lagos was still half asleep. The sun hadn't yet risen fully above the faded tin roofs. A thin mist hung across the sky like a gray cloth draped over the waking city. Ikorodu's streets were quiet, just a few old buses groaning through the haze, leaking the familiar smell of gasoline and dust. Pastor Daniel walked slowly along the uneven sidewalk, carrying a large cardboard box in his arms. It was what he did every week. Wake up before dawn, gather some bread, porridge, and boxes of milk, and bring them to the homeless around the old market. He always told his congregation, faith isn't just on the lips, it's in the hands that give, and the heart willing to kneel. This morning was no different. But he had no idea that this morning would change an entire community. As he turned onto a row of old convenience shops, he stopped abruptly. Right there, curled beneath a dripping awning, leaning against a stained, peeling wall, was a small, frail figure. An elderly woman, wrapped in a worn-out scarf with frayed edges, hugged herself tightly as though afraid the cold would pierce her bones. Her legs were pulled close, her worn-out slippers placed beside her, and strands of silver hair peeked out from beneath the damp cloth on her head. Pastor Daniel lowered the box and stepped closer. "Mama," he called softly. She didn't answer at first. She flinched, then slowly raised her head, and in that moment, his heart sank. Her eyes were red, maybe from sleeplessness, maybe from the wind or the rain, maybe from tears, he couldn't tell. But he recognized one thing immediately. Those were not the eyes of someone born from darkness. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to endure. He crouched down gently, placing a warm hand on her trembling shoulder. "Mama, why are you here all alone?" His voice didn't sound like he was interrogating her. It sounded like what someone asks a member of their own family, concerned, saddened. She blinked a few times, as if dragging scattered memories back into one place. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, like something inside had been scraped raw. "They said, I am a witch." The words dropped like stones. Pastor Daniel went silent for a moment. He had heard that word all his life during sermons about superstition, in old village stories, in the conflicts he'd been called to mediate when people tried to cast someone out for bringing bad spirits. But hearing it from the mouth of an old mother shivering beneath a cold awning tightened something in his chest. He lowered himself further until their eyes were level. A small breeze lifted the edge of her scarf, revealing hair stiffened by last night's rain. "Mama, what is your name?" "Uzo," she whispered. "They call me Mama Uzo." Pastor Daniel nodded. The name wasn't unfamiliar. He remembered hearing it during prayer requests. Shundu had once thanked God for his job, for the small house he'd just bought in Ikorodu, and for his mother. "You slept here since last night?" She smiled, thin, fragile, on the verge of breaking. "Last night, my child's house had no place for me anymore." He didn't ask anything else. Some stories don't need all the details to be understood. He reached into the box, pulled out a loaf of bread and a carton of milk, and placed them into her hands. "Mama, please eat something." She hesitated. I don't have money." "This isn't for sale, Mama. It's an offering to God. By accepting it, you're helping me, not owing me." She stared at him for a long moment before finally taking it. Her thin fingers, shaking from cold, hunger, and shame, barely had the strength to hold the plastic wrapper. He watched her nibble the bread in tiny bites, like she was afraid it might disappear. Then he asked softly, "They called you a witch. But what about you? What do you believe?" She lifted her gaze, eyes brimming. "I am only a mother. I gave birth to him. I raised him. I don't know how to do anything except." With these hands, she lifted her hands, the calloused palms, the half-broken nails, the blue veins rising beneath thin skin. "I only know how to cook, wash their clothes, pray for them." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what a witch even is." Pastor Daniel looked into her eyes, and he saw what the whole town had forgotten: gentleness that cannot be faked. Gentleness isn't sweet words. It isn't a bowed head. Gentleness is a small light still glowing in someone's eyes, even after life has trampled them. In her eyes he saw no darkness, no deceit, no resentment. He saw one silent question: why was I thrown out of the very home my own hands built? He exhaled slowly, as if settling a decision inside himself. "No, Mama," his voice deep and clear like a church bell cutting through the quiet morning. "I don't believe that. and I won't let this community keep believing it." She stared at him, confused, afraid to hope. "But they've told everyone already. My daughter-in-law," she told the neighbors. "They say the sickness, the bad luck, all came because of me." Her voice broke entirely. Pastor Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. "Rumors are like fire. They spread fastest when people are afraid. But Mama, every fire has someone who lit it. We will find who started this one. And in front of God and in front of everyone, I will clear your name." Because he knew this truth in his bones. If he stayed silent today, he wouldn't deserve to stand on the pulpit tomorrow. He stood and extended his hand. "Come with me, Mama. Let's go to the church first. You need rest. Leave the rest to me." She stared at his hand for a long, long time. Her whole life, she had been the one reaching out to help others, steadying her toddler, supporting her sick husband, lifting boiling pots from the stove, fixing old doors. This was one of the rare moments when someone reached out to support her. Finally, she placed her trembling hand in his. As they walked toward the small church tucked behind the market, Pastor Daniel slowed his pace to match hers. He guided her over puddles, steadied her when she slipped, always keeping a respectful distance close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough she wouldn't feel like a burden. A few people recognized him and greeted him. Then they noticed who walked beside him. "Isn't that the old woman they threw out last night?" "That's her. They said she carries dark spirits." "Why is the pastor walking with her?" The whispers began. Pastor Daniel heard every word. But he didn't stop. He only tightened his hold on Mama Uzo's hand. Inside him, a battle had already begun, between faith and fear, truth and lies, a mother and an entire community desperate for someone to blame. And he knew, if he didn't step into that fire, no one else would. When the wooden church door closed behind them, the noise outside stayed where it belonged. Gone were the engines, the gossip, the suspicion. Only soft morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting gentle stripes across the old pews, carrying the quiet smell of wood and candles. "Mama, sit here." He pulled out a chair and laid a dry cloth over it. "From now on, this is your home. At least, until the truth finds its way back to you." She looked up at the wooden cross on the wall, then down at her battered hands. "Do you think God still hears prayers from someone like me?" She whispered, as though the question itself might crack the walls. Pastor Daniel smiled, the gentle smile his congregation often said, "Makes people stop fearing God and start wanting to walk toward Him." If God only heard the prayers of people who were never wronged, He wouldn't have hung on the cross. She went silent. Then the first tears since being cast out of her home spilled down her weathered hands. Hot tears. Tears even she hadn't expected. Pastor Daniel knelt beside her. "Let us pray, Mama, not for them to believe us, but for the courage to tell the truth." He placed his hand over hers and closed his eyes. It wasn't just a prayer for a mother. It was the opening line of a battle he knew would force an entire village to confront its own fear. And in that small church in Lagos, a decision was sealed. "No, Mama, it is not you. And we will make this right." From that moment, he was no longer just a pastor of a congregation. He became the man standing between an old mother and a community ready to throw stones. That afternoon, the Lagos sky turned a thick, heavy gray, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Hot wind rushed through the narrow alleys, kicking red dust up onto the steps of the small church tucked behind the market. The church wasn't big. Its plaster walls were peeling. The wooden cross on the wall had aged with the years. But that evening, it was packed. Wooden benches scraped and groaned. Slippers shuffled. Children were yanked down by their mothers. "Be quiet. Today the pastor is going to expose a witch. They say that old woman cursed her own grandchildren." The whole neighborhood came, not for faith, but for curiosity and fear. In the front row, Chinedu sat with his fingers laced so tightly together that his knuckles turned white. Since he walked in, He hadn't dared look at his mother once. Guilt weighed on his shoulders like a slab of stone. Nika was different. She stood up before anyone called her, like this was her personal stage. Her dress was neat, her headscarf tied tight, her makeup subtle. But her eyes were sharp, cold, like blades. "Pastor," she began loud and clear, trying to sound more controlled than she felt. "She has turned me against my husband. She cursed our home. Since she came, I've been sick. The child cries nonstop. His job has gone downhill. That's not a coincidence. She carries dark energy." Murmurs exploded behind her. "That's true. Their home was peaceful before. Ever since the mother-in-law showed up, bad things started happening. Who can say there's no dark spirit there?" Pastor Daniel stood at the pulpit, back straight, hands resting on the worn wood. He didn't rush to answer. He didn't let his voice ride the wave of emotion that was spreading like fire. He looked around the room. Familiar faces, yet somehow different now. People who read scripture every Sunday. People who sang hymns. People who tithed faithfully. Today, their eyes were not eyes of faith. They were eyes of fear dressed up as righteousness. "Pastor, you have to protect us from dark forces," someone called out. "Exactly. If she really is a witch, we must do something." Pastor Daniel raised one hand. The noise slowly died down. He bent over, opened the small drawer under the pulpit, and pulled out an old Bible, its cover worn, its pages yellowed. It was the one he'd used for years, the one the congregation saw as a symbol of the truth he preached. He laid it on the pulpit where everyone could see. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his low, steady voice filling the room without a microphone. "All morning I've heard many words, Nika's words, the neighbor's words, the market's words. But here," he set his hand on the Bible, "here we stand before someone greater than any rumor." He turned toward Mama Uzo. She was standing near the back, as if trying to shrink herself into the wall. Her thin hands trembled, clenching each other, eyes fixed on the floor. "Mama, please come forward." Every head turned. Each step she took toward the front seemed to drag a whole lifetime of hard days behind it. The soft slap of her worn slippers echoed strangely loud in the silence. No one reached out to steady her. No one patted her arm. No one looked at her the way they used to. When she stopped in front of the pulpit, Pastor Daniel asked, "Mama, before God, tell us, have you ever used dark powers or done anything to harm your children or grandchildren?" She lifted her head, and for the first time that day, her eyes met the entire room. "If I have done anything wrong," she said, her voice rough but every word clear, "God knows. I have nothing to hide. I only know how to cook food, wash clothes, pray for them. I don't know what a curse is." A few people snorted under their breath. Some shook their heads, half convinced, half doubtful. Nika stepped forward half a pace and pointed at her. "She's lying. Pastor, don't believe her. She uses that gentle look to trick people. Dark spirits are very clever. That's enough, Nika." The pastor's voice was not loud, but it blocked her words like a wall. He turned back to the crowd and spoke slowly. "If Mama Uzo truly carries dark powers, then when I lay hands and pray, God will show it. Amen?" A few timid amens. Then more. Then, slowly, the whole church answered amen in one rolling wave. The air grew heavy. Mama Uzo stood there, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. She didn't fully understand everything they were accusing her of. She only knew one thing. If God didn't stand with her today, her entire life would be destroyed. Pastor Daniel stepped down from the pulpit until he was right in front of her. He set the Bible on a small side table, then gently placed one hand on her silver head. His other hand lifted into the air. He closed his eyes. "Lord." His voice rose not like a memorized speech, but like words dragged straight out of his heart. "You are the one who sees what people cannot see. If there is any darkness here, expose it. If there is someone here who is innocent and yet carries false guilt, expose that as well." The whole room held its breath. Some people closed their eyes in agreement. Some kept one eye open, curious to see how the witch would react. Some clutched their children tighter, waiting for a sign that would prove their fear was justified. The air around Mama Uzo felt like it was closing in. She could feel the warmth of his hand on her head. Inside her, a smaller, trembling prayer rose. Lord, if I am innocent, please don't be silent. And in that moment, everything snapped, but it didn't snap from her side. It snapped somewhere else. Suddenly, Nika screamed. A sharp, jagged sound like someone ripping a mask off her face. Stop. Stop praying. I can't take it. The whole church whipped around. She stood several pews away, hands grabbing her head, her entire body shaking. Her eyes were wide with panic, no longer cold, no longer composed, no longer in control. Stop it. Stop. Her voice cracked. Pastor, stop praying. I feel hot. Like something is choking me. People stared. Who's hot? It's not the old woman, it's her. Waves of confused whispering spread again. Pastor Daniel kept his hand on Mama Uzo's head, but his eyes opened and locked onto Nika. He didn't stretch his hand toward her. He didn't walk to her. He simply spoke slow, firm, each word dropping into the silence like stones into still water. The one who cannot stand the prayer is not Mama Uzo. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Nika stumbled back a step. Then another, her face drained of color, lips trembling. No, I'm just tired. But her excuse came too late. The eyes in that room began to shift. The butcher who always shouted the loudest had nothing to say. The fish seller, who that morning had talked about witches' eyes, swallowed hard. A child tugged at his mother's arm and whispered, "But Mama, why is she hurt? And not the old lady?" No one answered, because everyone understood. They just didn't want to be the first to admit it. In that single fragile moment, the rumors carefully stacked up all night and all morning, like a house made of matchsticks, began to sway. Everything flipped in an instant. And it wasn't because of thunder. It wasn't because of some flashy miracle. It was because of something painfully simple. The loudest accuser was the one who couldn't stand the light of prayer. Under the pressure of the entire community, the air inside the church grew so heavy it felt difficult to breathe. No one whispered anymore. No more, maybe, they said. I heard. Silence filled the room, and that silence pressed on Nika's shoulders like a collapsing roof. She still stood there, hands gripping her head, chest rising and falling quickly, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. But all she found was walls, wooden pews, and dozens of eyes staring straight into her, not with curiosity, but with accusation. Nika. Pastor Daniel's voice rose steady, deep, calm, without the need to shout. In the house of God before God himself. Do you have anything you want to say? The question hung in the air like a final rope stretched over a cliff. Either she grabbed it, or she fell. Nika swallowed hard. Her lips were cracked, her face drained of color. She glanced around hoping someone might speak up for her, the way Chinedu always did when she threw tantrums or complained. But this time, no one moved. Chinedu looked at her, but the look in his eyes was no longer admiration, no devotion, no softness. What she saw was the look of a man who just realized he had let someone else steer his life straight into darkness. That look scared Nika more than any sermon. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor, catching herself with trembling hands. A sob burst out, small at first, muffled, and suddenly loud and broken, like a dam giving way. She tried to speak, her voice shaking so hard the words clashed into each other. I hated living with my mother-in-law. A few people in the congregation sniffed. In Lagos, mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law conflicts were nothing new. But seeing it exposed this rawly, in the middle of a church, was something else entirely. I wanted her out of the house. Nika continued, tears washing away the makeup on her face. I was tired of sharing my husband with anyone. I hated seeing him smile at her, care for her, Ask if she had eaten or slept well. Her voice cracked on the word hated. And suddenly, the crowd no longer saw any dark energy. They saw nothing supernatural. Just a selfish, frightened girl wearing the mask of a grown woman. She swallowed. I made everything up. I told the neighbors she carried evil spirits. I said the baby got sick because of her. I said my husband's work failed because she brought bad luck. I exaggerated everything because I knew they would believe it. I knew people are always ready to believe something scary rather than face the truth inside themselves. That last sentence struck like lightning. People weren't just shocked at her confession. They were shocked at how easily they themselves had been manipulated. Whispers erupted again, but this time they were filled with anger. How could you do that? That old mother, did you think she was trash? We added our voices too, so now we share the guilt. The fish seller who earlier had loudly claimed she saw a witch's eyes covered her face. Good heavens, I even told people her eyes were evil. The butcher muttered, "From today, I'll cut meat and mind my own business." Embarrassment and shame crept into the crowd like smoke. In the front row, Shinidu stood frozen. Every word from Nika stabbed deeper into him, reminding him of every moment he had come home to her gloomy face. Listening to her complain, his mother looked at the baby strangely. Or did chores the wrong way, or brought bad luck. Every time the baby coughed, she blamed his mother. Every bad week at work, she whispered. Ever since she came, this started happening, and he believed it. He let fear and superstition outweigh a lifetime of truth. The woman who starved so he could eat. Who walked miles in storms to buy his first school shoes. Who bent her back so he wouldn't have to bend his. He turned and looked at his mother. Mama Uzo stood silent, her thin shoulders trembling. She didn't speak. She didn't scold him. She didn't ask why he chose someone else's words over her lifetime of love. Her silence hurt him more than any slap could. He rose to his feet. The bench creaked softly. Everyone watched, but he didn't care. He walked to his mother, the same woman he had pointed to the door just yesterday saying, "Mother, leave." Now he fell to his knees before her. The bang of his knees hitting the floor echoed through the church sharp, dry, painful, but nowhere near as painful as what he felt inside. "Mother." His voice broke hoarse, as if he had sprinted through all the years of his life just to arrive at this moment. "I was wrong." His shoulders shook. He didn't dare look up, not because of the crowd. He had faced the eyes of a city before corporate pressures, money-driven expectations, professional judgment. But he had never felt so small, as he did kneeling before the woman who gave him life. "I am not worthy to be your son," he whispered, every word scraping through his throat. "I let others decide your fate with their tongues. I trusted rumors more than the years you raised me. I watched you walk out of the house, because I opened the door for you." The church went silent. Even the children sensed something sacred was happening. Something you don't witness just by attending Sunday service. He went on, voice breaking completely. "If you want, you can say I am no longer your son. I will accept it. I deserve it. But if there is even a little love left for me in your heart, please give me a chance to make this right." Tears hit the floor dark, spreading slowly. Pastor Daniel watched, feeling he was witnessing something more powerful than any sermon he had ever preached. A man learning how to kneel in the right place. Mama Uzo looked at her son, her vision blurred by tears. All her life, she had prayed he would stand strong. Never had she imagined seeing him kneel before her, not to beg for money, not for favors, but for permission. To return to the right path. She raised her hand. That same hand that once carried him as a newborn, guided his steps when he learned to walk, soothed him the night he failed his first exam. Now wrinkled, spotted, trembling. Yet still the one place he would always belong. She laid it gently on his head, stroking his hair as she once did long ago. "My son." Just those two words made something inside him break wide open. Mistakes are part of life. Her voice was slow, soft like an old lullaby. No one walks through this world without stumbling, not even me. I once hurt your grandfather too. I argued I was stubborn. God knows. She paused, eyes drifting somewhere far, perhaps to the village where she grew up. Then she held his head more firmly, afraid he might disappear, but knowing how to turn back. She smiled a wet, trembling smile that somehow shone. That is the blessing. The words rolled through the room, not just for Chinedu but for every person present. Pastor Daniel nodded slightly. If he could take all his years of preaching and condense them into one truth, it would be exactly what Mama Uzo just said. Blessed is not the one who never errs, but the one who finds the way back. Sniffling rose from the back. Someone turned away, pretending to look out the window just to wipe their tears. Nika still knelt in the corner, sobbing to exhaustion. Her pride had dissolved. She understood now that from this day forward, whenever she walked through the market, eyes would remind her that not everything she wanted could be achieved by destroying someone else. Pastor Daniel broke the silence with a soft but firm question. Nika, do you have anything you want to say to Mama Uzo? She lifted her swollen eyes, her voice nearly gone. Mother, She hesitated, the word mother heavy on her tongue. I'm sorry. I was selfish. I only thought of my own feelings. I forgot, before I was a wife, I was a daughter-in-law. And before that, I was a woman. I should have understood a mother's heart. Her voice cracked again. If you don't forgive me, I won't blame you. But please, don't let your son bear the punishment for loving me wrongly. Mama Uzo looked at her for a long time. She saw a young woman blinded by jealousy, pushed by fear of losing her husband, drawn into cruelty she didn't fully understand. She saw a shadow of her younger self in the days she had once been jealous too, of anything that stole her husband's attention from home. She sighed. I cannot forget what you did. She said honestly, no pretense. But I can choose not to let it keep poisoning my heart. The congregation froze. That wasn't cheap forgiveness. It wasn't the easy, I forgive you, people say for appearances. It was the hardest type of forgiveness, choosing not to let pain turn into hatred. She then turned to Pastor Daniel. My son, now the pastor will help us. I am just an old woman. I only wish for a place to sit on the porch. Hear my grandchild laugh. Listen to a pot of soup boiling. Pastor Daniel nodded. We will talk about next steps. But today, the truth has been revealed. From this moment on, no one shall call Mama Uzo a witch again. If anyone does, that person is fighting against their own conscience. This time, the amen rose loudly, not out of fear, but out of relief. And in that small Lagos church at dusk, people finally understood. A rumor can destroy an innocent life, but it can also destroy the humanity inside us. If we don't dare to say, I was wrong, the afternoon Mama Uzo came home, Lagos wore a different face. The sky was no longer thick and gray like on the day of the prayer meeting. The late sun poured a honey gold light over the narrow street in Ikorodu, slipping through tangled power lines, bouncing off faded sheets of tin, and landing on the rusted iron gate of the house that had once been a family battlefield. That same gate had slammed shut behind her the night she was thrown out like a sentence being passed. Today, it opened again, but by different hands. Not her trembling, frightened hands, but Chinedu's. He stood there on the stained concrete, hand gripping the gate, drawing in a deep breath, like he was afraid if he exhaled too hard, the moment would shatter. Mother. His voice was quiet. Mama Uzo stopped at the entryway. The old scarf was still wrapped around her head, but something in the way she carried herself had changed. She was no longer hunched like someone bracing for another shove. She stood a little straighter, looking at the doorway with an expression both familiar and strange, like seeing an old friend after a very long, painful misunderstanding. Today, I'm bringing you home, Chinedu said, making no attempt to hide the emotion in his voice, like a child learning how to apologize. Not like that day, Not to push you out again, but to tell you, this is where you belong. She looked at him for so long he started to feel afraid. Then she simply nodded and stepped through the gate. The sound of it closing behind her no longer felt like a sentence. It sounded like the closing of an old chapter, making room for a new one to open. In the yard, her old wooden chair had been pulled back under the shade of the mango tree, right where she used to sit in the evenings, picking vegetables while watching the children play. The chair that once had a broken leg, the one she'd propped up with a loose brick, now had a new wooden leg, sanded smooth, leveled properly. Chinedu patted the armrest lightly. I remember you always sat here, after you left. Every time I looked at this empty spot, I finally understood. The house never lacked things. It just lacked you. Mama Uzo ran her hand along the arm of the chair. Old scratches and new wood overlapped, like her own heart. Wounded, patched, but still with enough room left to sit, to love. You fixed it yourself? She asked softly. I got the carpenter from up the street, but I was here the whole time. He laughed, eyes glistening. I wanted to do something with my hands. Not to send you away, but to keep you here. She didn't say, thank you. Mothers who've spent their whole lives giving rarely say that to their children. She simply sat down, shifting slightly until she found that old familiar position. The house was quiet for a moment. Then from the doorway came the sound of hurried footsteps. It was Nika. She stood at the threshold, unable to take another step. Her headscarf was gone, her face bare, her eyes still swollen from crying. Today she wasn't wearing a beautiful put-together outfit like she did for parties, just a simple house dress, slightly wrinkled like her heart now. Mother. The word caught in her throat. She had said Mama many times before, but with a different tone, cold, annoyed, as a formality. Today, Mother slipped out so softly that if you weren't listening closely, you might mistake it for the wind. Mama Uzo looked up. Nika, she said her name without sweetness, but without sharpness either. Her voice was level as if calling a neighbor over to help with a small favor. Nika stepped down from the doorway, each step feeling like walking across hot coals. I don't know where to start. She gave a twisted little smile. If I say I'm sorry, I know it's not enough to erase that night. Not enough to erase the way I talked about you to the whole market, the whole street. Not enough to erase the way I used everyone as fear to push you out of your own home. She swallowed and pushed on. But if I say nothing, then for the rest of my life I'll only ever be the daughter-in-law who threw her mother-in-law out. And maybe I deserve to be called that. A soft breeze drifted through the yard. Children's voices calling each other to play soccer in the alley floated in from outside. Nika took a deeper breath. I don't expect you to forget. I don't even expect you to forgive me right away. I'm asking you to give me a chance someday. To make things right. To learn how to do something that isn't about keeping your son all to myself, but about proving I actually deserve to be in this house. For the first time, her voice held no edge, no sharpness. Just a young woman staring at the darkness she herself had created. Mama Uzo studied her for a long moment. Do you know, she said slowly, what hurt me the most? Wasn't the night I was thrown out. Nika looked up, startled. Leaving the house, in the cold, in the rain. I can handle that. I slept in markets when I was young. I walked through storms to sell vegetables. The worst part was seeing the child I raised with these hands. She lifted her calloused palms. Stand there in silence while someone called me a witch. The words pierced Chinedu's chest all over again. He bowed his head. But, she continued, today he knelt before me. In front of everyone. And I saw. God still gave him a heart that knows how to turn back. I can't reject that gift. She turned to Nika. As for you, you are his wife. And you are the mother of my grandchild. If I hate you, I would hate a part of my grandbaby too. I don't want that. Nika broke down again. I can't forget everything. Mama Uzo said it plainly, without pretending. but I can choose not to bring it up every day. I'm old. I don't want to carry heavy grudges. You want to make things right? Then start with this. From now on, don't use fear to control people. Don't use rumors to win a fight in your own home. Because every time you win that way, the whole house loses. Nika nodded over and over, tears spilling faster than she could wipe them away. A few days later, the village held a small clearing of names gathering in the churchyard. It wasn't a grand ceremony, no drums, no parade, but everyone who had helped spread the rumor showed up. A simple wooden board was propped up, with chalk writing scrawled across it, clearing the name of Mama Uzo. It looked clumsy, but for a community, it was rare and powerful, admitting they were wrong. Pastor Daniel stood at the front, the same old Bible in his hand. Next to him stood Mama Uzo, and behind her were Chindu Nika, and the little grandchild holding tightly onto her hand, as if afraid she might disappear again. Brothers and sisters, the pastor began, we are not here today just to say sorry. If that's all we do, tomorrow we might repeat this with someone else. Today we are here to look straight at what happened. His gaze swept across the crowd. When our hearts are blinded by fear, he said quietly, we will see gentle people as monsters. When our minds are filled with stories from other people's mouths, we stop hearing the truth inside our own. And the scariest thing is not witches, but when an entire village agrees to call an innocent person a witch just to avoid facing themselves. A light breeze stirred the clothes on people's backs and flipped a few pages in his Bible. But when light comes, he continued, eyes resting on her, truth still stands. People can twist it for a while. Rumors can travel faster. But in the end, truth doesn't need to scream. It only needs not to bow. He turned to Mama Uzo. Today, in front of everyone, we say it plainly. Mama Uzo is not a witch. She is a mother. She has endured more than we ever realized. And each one of us standing here bears a share of the blame for her pain. The butcher stepped forward, scratching his head. Mama, I'm sorry. My mouth is big. Sometimes it talks before my brain does. From now on, if someone brings gossip to my table, I'll cut meat and cut my words too. The crowd burst into laughter, the sound snapping the tension like a thin cord. The fish seller stepped forward and clasped Mama Uzo's hand. Ma, I spoke badly about you. I was so scared I didn't even dare look you in the eye, turns out. What I was most afraid of wasn't you. It was admitting I might be wrong. Another person added quietly, we all need to learn how to stay quiet when we're not sure we rewrite. The words were clumsy but sincere. Mama Uzo answered with only a smile. A smile after months of curling up under shop awnings, after nights in the cold asking herself what she had done wrong. She didn't say, I forgive all of you. But that smile, and the fact that she stayed instead of turning her back and walking away, was answer enough. Evening slowly settled. Back home, Mama Uzo sat in her old wooden chair. Chinedu brought her a cup of hot tea. Her grandchild climbed into her lap, tracing the lines on her face with small fingers and asking, Grandma, they called you a witch. Is that true? Chinedu nearly dropped the cup. Nika froze in the doorway. Mama Uzo burst into gentle laughter, soft as a pillow, warm as a blanket. If I'm a witch, she said, chuckling, then the only magic I have is making a pot of soup so good the whole house eats till they're full. Do you think that kind of magic is scary? The child shook their head, grin stretching across their face. Then I like this witch. Their laughter floated out onto the porch, blending with the familiar sounds of Lagos cars, street vendors, music drifting from a radio somewhere. And out there, slowly, the rumor of the witch woman began to die, replaced by a different story. The story of a mother who was misunderstood, a son who learned to kneel and apologize, a wife who dared to face her own wrongdoing, and a community brave enough to say, we were wrong.